And we back again. This is us putting the bow on the R. Kelly case today. If you haven't been hiding under a rock, he was found guilty today. And today we'll talk about all of the things that came out of this. What does this mean for other celebrities when it comes to sex trafficking charges? What does it mean for other men in general when it comes to sex trafficking charges? But they came back today and found R. Kelly guilty on all 9 federal sex trafficking and racketeering charges. The verdict was announced Monday in the Brooklyn courthouse for the Eastern District of New York. The disgraced R&B singer, 54, faces 10 years, the mandatory minimum, to life in prison for the charges related to nearly 30 years worth of allegations that he physically and sexually abused women and minors. Now, again, what you must understand still is what? Sex trafficking and racketeering. Again, do I think they proved racketeering? No. But when you go do digging, which I did, and you go to kind of understand what the sex trafficking actually stands for, then you can see why he got found guilty of that. It's very cloudy in terms of how it's written, and murky, but that's the law for you. But sex trafficking is defined by the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act. Now, that word right there, commercial sex act. Any sex act on account of anything of value given to or received by any person. And see, this is what I was talking about. When stuff like this is done, sometimes these verdicts are given because it's a setup for everything that's now getting ready to come after that. So now the Deshaun Watson case that's going on. Because now it's defined as any sex act on account of anything of value given to or received by any person. You have women who want prostitution legal. How do we legalize it and have a sex trafficking law at the same time? Now, when athletes are flying women out and crossing state lines, that's sex trafficking. And because you have this is now the ground zero case for this to be done, guess what a Me Too movement will now turn their attention to? All of these so-called powerful men with money who fly women out, Instagram models and all of that. And it's a paper trail for it all. It's a paper trail for it all at this point. What do you think is getting ready to happen to the men who flew these women out? What do you think is getting ready to happen now to any man that when a woman is scorned, you grab 4 or 5 of these women and you have a man who has the means to, hey, just come hang out with me for the weekend. I'll take care of you. Did you have sex with him? I kind of felt like I was obligated to because he was taking care of me and buying me all these things. Sex act on account of anything of value given to or received by any person. So now, when you buy a pair of shoes, if she's having sex with you, now we can call that sex trafficking. This is now teetering on the lines of women trying to empty that sex cup, that body count. They want to erase their body count. So what have a lot of adult women done? See, these same adult women now who saying these men are predators were the same 16, 17-year-old girls who was hanging with us, who we wanted to date, and they told us, you can't provide nothing for us. We need him. So it wasn't again that it wasn't boys their age who wanted to be with them. These were young ladies who wanted the bag. So who holds them responsible? Nobody, because the game gonna be the game on every level. But what's happening now is you get a lot of these women who've gotten older, and what do they want to do? He took advantage of me, so I was abused. Were you abused? Or did you want to deal with somebody who you could get some monetary gain from at that point? Those are different conversations that need to be had. Were you abused? Or could he provide a lifestyle for you your parents couldn't provide for you? And no child your age could provide for you. The verdict followed 5 weeks of often harrowing testimony from 50 witnesses and arrived swiftly on the second day of jury deliberations, which means they knew his ass was guilty the second they went in that room. Which is why I told you again when the Tasha K thing happened. If I was his lawyers, I'm pushing for a mistrial. Because the waters have already been muddied. There's no one who got onto this jury who didn't know of the Aaliyah story already and the sex tape. And then the surviving R. Kelly. So there's no way he went in with somebody in the jury pool in good faith to begin with. Kelly was found guilty on one count of racketeering, a charge that is often levied in organized crime cases, and 8 of violating the Mann Act, which is aimed at curbing sex trafficking. Now, let's go see what the definition of the Mann Act is before we go any further. The Mann Act is a federal law that criminalizes the transportation of any woman or girl for the purpose of prostitution or debauchery or for any other immoral purpose. The Mann Act passed in June 1910 and named after Illinois Congressman James R. Mann invoked the Commerce Clause to felonize the use of interstate or foreign commerce to transport women for immoral purposes. The act was aimed at prostitution, immorality, and human trafficking. And see, immoral, that's a broad, you're dealing with a broad scope at that point when you're using that word. Because again, this is what I'm telling you now. If they know you slept, you flew 9, 10, 11 women across state lines, transported them across state lines, had them driven across state lines for the right to have sex with them for a few days. This is what they're going to charge you with now. This is what they're going to charge you with now, the Mann Act. And see, this is what I'm telling you men a lot of times when you're jumping on board to support these things in these fights is to your own detriment. Because, again, like I told you from the get-go, sex trafficking, I wasn't a fan of them charging them with that. Racketeering charge, I wasn't a fan of them charging him with that. See, if you want to put that The Aaliyah situation on his jacket, that's fine. We know that happened. If you want to use Sparkle's niece, 15 years old, having a sex tape with her, that's fine. We know that happened. So when you start doing stuff like this, now you can really start lumping all men into stuff like this. So now, any well-off man who's making six figures, 2, 3, 400 grand, and he meet a girl on Instagram model, and she, I just want to come spend some time with you for the weekend. Yeah, what you trying to do then? Well, I ain't flying you out. You ain't giving it up. Well, what you giving me if I come out there then? I take you out to eat. I take you shopping, stuff like that. Now we got the Man Act. Now we're getting ready to have a whole lot of men on trumped up charges on trial for something they shouldn't be on trial for, but we've allowed this to now move forward, and we've allowed R. Kelly to be the test case for this. And now what they'll do is, whenever they put these men on trial, what they're now going to do is reference this case and say, hey, in 2021, we were able to charge R. Kelly with this for doing the same thing. So it is precedent for doing this. And once the precedent is set in the court of law, good night. Congress appointed a commission in 1907 to investigate into the problem of immigrant prostitutes. It was alleged that immigrant women were brought to America for sexual slavery, and immigrant men lured American girls into prostitution or white slavery. The committees believed that no girl would enter prostitution unless drugged or held captive. This led to public outrage, which eventually resulted in the enactment of the Mann Act. And what did they say? This committee believed that no girl would enter prostitution unless drugged or held captive. They didn't think women wanted to get paid for having sex back then. But we know in 2021, that's a lie. So now we have a rule that is now 111 years old. But that's not the way of the world anymore. However, many critics note that the act ended up criminalizing many kinds of consensual sexual activity and had racist undertones. The phrase immoral purpose was broadly used to prosecute unlawful premarital, extramarital, and interracial relationships following Caminiti versus United States. Let me put a pin right here because this might be a whole nother episode. Where the United States Supreme Court held that illicit fornication, even when consensual, constituted an immoral purpose. It didn't matter if the woman consented, the man would be liable irrespectively. Furthermore, if the woman consented, she could be held as an accessory to the crime. So illicit fornication, even when consensual. You men in open Pandora's box, man. Good night. Good night. While the act was never repealed, it was amended a few times, the most notable of which were in 1978 to address issues of child pornography, and in 1986 to address the act's misuse against consensual sex by replacing the phrase any other immoral purpose with any sexual activity for which any person can be charged with a criminal offense. And again, when they say criminal offense, that's still technically, if you fly a woman out and you put her in a hotel room and you're doing that for the purpose of y'all having sex, that's still technically prostitution. Which is why I'm saying Pandora's box has been opened. Kelly's legal team did not respond to the Washington Post request for comment on the verdict. And Kelly's lawyers also stated that the team would consider an appeal. Gloria Allred, who represented three accusers, described Kelly as the worst of all the predators that I have pursued throughout her 47 years of practicing law. R. Kelly thought that he could get away with all of this, but he didn't, Allred said outside the courthouse, because despite the fact that he thought he could control all of his victims, he was wrong. And in this right here, I'm not getting ready to question any of this as I did previous episodes, because previous videos, what I was doing was breaking down what was going on. At this point, he chose to have a jury trial. He chose to be judged by a jury of his peers. Found guilty. That's it for me. It is what it is. Now, what we will discuss is the fallout of it. But in terms of questioning his guilt at this point, you guys know my stance on it already. I don't believe he was guilty of racketeering or sex trafficking. But again, like I said, I told you guys, he wasn't charged with statutory rape in this case. Wasn't charged with sexual assault, to my knowledge, in this case. Wasn't charged with sex with underage girls in this case. See, the things that they should have been charging him on, they wasn't charging him on. So at that point, again, like I said, racketeering and sex trafficking under the Mann Act, which is basically you paying for women to come cross state lines to have sex with you. See, that's me thinking now you're trying to punish him for things you couldn't convict him of earlier. And see, I never want to be a fan of the justice system working that way. This Leonardo DiCaprio is Catch Me If You Can at that point. But like I said, you had all the evidence to get him for Aaliyah. You didn't care. And you had the evidence to get him for Sparkle's niece, and you didn't. So, but in all 11 accusers testified, a woman identified as Jane stated that she was forced into sexual encounters with other women and was unable to leave rooms without Kelly's permission. Another, Geronda Pace, said he assaulted her and knowingly gave her herpes, an assertion seemingly backed by a personal physician who took the stand to discuss medical history. And of course, we know that physician said Kelly never tested positive for herpes. But again, that is what that is. Jane also said that Kelly forced her to have an abortion. The same day as Jane's testimony, a woman who spoke in court anonymously said Kelly once told her he married Aaliyah in 94 when the up-and-coming single was 15 so that she could legally obtain an abortion. Multiple witnesses made mention of Aaliyah, who died in a plane crash in 2001. A woman named Angela said she saw Kelly sexually abuse Aaliyah on a tour bus when Aaliyah would have been 13 years old. And again, like I said, it's all interesting. But like I said, he stood firm today. He had his day in court. He lost on his day in court. And that is basically what that is at that point. Now, R. Kelly will be sentenced in May as other criminal charges move forward. Set to be sentenced at 10 a.m. on May 4th by the same federal judge who oversaw his racketeering and sex trafficking trial in Brooklyn. He faces as little as 10 years and as many as life in prison. The intervening months will be busy in the next few weeks. Mr. Kelly's lawyers can file motions seeking to overturn the verdict. Mr. Kelly also faces charges in at least 2 other states, including federal child pornography and obstruction counts in Chicago. Now, not that it's going to matter at this point, but, that federal child pornography charge. So if they can get him on that, then I think you damage his brand completely. Because nobody wants to be deemed as supporting a child pornography, a pedophile at that point. So somebody involved in child pornography, that's a different conversation. That trial has been postponed several times and a new date has not been set. A court conference in that case has been set for October 20th. Mr. Kelly's lawyer said he didn't know if that trial would go forward before the sentencing or if Mr. Kelly would be moved to Chicago from the Brooklyn detention facility. Where he had been held for the duration of the New York trial. Spokesmen for the U.S. attorneys in Brooklyn and Chicago did not respond to requests for comment. At the Brooklyn sentencing, Judge Ann M. Donnelly will be able to consider victim impact statements and testimony from Mr. Kelly's accusers, some of which will be filed with the court ahead of time. And again, the sad thing is, this has come to a weird place. Because we're at a point where you really don't have to prove anything. And the woman is now, men are being put in a position now where they're guilty until proven innocent. And the accusations no longer have to be proven. It's just, as long as I say he did it, then I'm the victim. So, we also go into much of the evidence that prosecutors used to convict R. Kelly came from the singer himself. He obsessively collected message slips and letters written by the women he interacted with, some of them underage, according to Ryan Chabot, the lead federal investigator in the case. Mr. Chabot said he sifted through the evidence recovered from several searches of the singer's Chicago apartment and storage facility. Mr. Kelly kept some of the evidence in FedEx folders with labels like old messages and other pieces, like a 7-page front and back handwritten letter from a woman who testified for 3 days early in the trial in protective sleeves in a locked safe. And again, for me, I don't know why he had those women writing those letters. But like I said, the man was off. And he basically got what he deserved at the end of the day. He just didn't get it for the crimes he committed. See, I don't believe crimes were committed in this case. Prior, yes. And see, that's my biggest worry is you don't want to get into a justice system where they start holding you accountable for things that they couldn't prove you did earlier. And they're holding you accountable for things you weren't even charged for. They kept bringing Aaliyah's name up, but you wasn't charged for Aaliyah. They kept bringing Sparkle's niece up, but you wasn't charged for Sparkle's niece. You was charged for these, racketeering in the Mann Act. And again, if paying for women to come and visit you and buying them clothes and shoes and gifts and putting them up in hotel rooms to have sex with them, if you're getting ready to go to jail for that, there's going to be a lot of entertainers and athletes on their way to jail. This is why I'm saying Pandora's box has been opened at this point. And I don't know what's getting ready to come of it. So see, he had at the age of 17, I never had sex with R. Kelly, well, a woman wrote, then proceeded to tick off a list of specific sex acts that she said she had not participated in with the R&B superstar. Which again, you already had a witness state earlier, the man was basically functioning illiterate. And maybe he couldn't even comprehend how weird that even looked. But again, it's hard for me to say he held women captive when all of these women say, I just got fed up and I got up and walked out the front door. To me, that's not being held captive. So see, those are my issues all the time with the case. That's why I took the stance I took. As I told you before, there are two things I know he was guilty of: marrying Aaliyah and sleeping with Sparkle's 15-year-old niece. But we didn't put him in jail for that. So, they spoke to Gloria Allred. And of course, the spokesperson for the Me Too movement, as she said, justice has been done. She has often represented women who have been victims of sexual harassment and assault by powerful men, including in the case against the movie producer Harvey Weinstein. But she said that of all the predators that I have pursued, Mr. Kelly is the worst. Worse than Harvey Weinstein. No, I'm not buying that. But of course, I know why she said that also, because we know who Harvey Weinstein is friends with at the end of the day. And who is that? Oprah. So of course, he's even worse than Harvey Weinstein. Mr. Kelly used his celebrity to manipulate and sexually abuse underage girls, Ms. Allred said, and had used a network of enablers to help build and sustain that world of torment and abuse. That's my next problem. Why weren't any of those people charged? So you can't let the enablers of the sex ring off. If you're saying this was some type of elaborate scheme in a network, all of those people need to be punished who helped all of this happen. Because at the end of the day, he was just the one to have sex with the women. There was a group of people who looked at these girls, got these girls information, paid for flights, booked hotels, got their clothes, got all these things together to get him to be presented in a certain fashion. Ms. Allred represented 3 of the 6 victims whose accounts were at the center of the case, as well as 2 other key witnesses in the trial. She also represented a 3rd who in the end was not called to testify. Let this be a message to other celebrities who also use their fame to prey on their fans, Ms. Allred said. The issue is not if the law will catch up to you. The only question is when. Listen again. Let this be a message to other celebrities who also use their fame to prey on their fans. See, that's how they're going to now start classifying you men, bringing women who want to have sex with you and flying them out, putting them in hotels and having sex with them. Now it's going to be you took advantage of them and you preyed on them because they was a fan. They couldn't give consent. Now, you got the other weird case is the R. Kelly diehard fans who was outside reacting to the verdict. You had a few of them stating, "We are not giving up," one woman shouted into a megaphone as Mr. Kelly's lawyers left the courthouse Monday afternoon. Free Robert Sylvester Kelly. Now, again, if you think when I tell you how crazy and batshit crazy these women are, you have to understand that. This is it right here. You got a segment of black women who want them in jail, and you got a segment of black women who want to have sex with him. There's a segment who views him as a predator. There's a segment who look at him as a sex icon. You have to make it make sense. Then you have another black woman who says, this is a racist country. Mr. Kelly, like many of the women and men who testified against him, is black. Now, what they're going to try and do is say, if he was white, this wouldn't have happened. And they'll bring Elvis into play. But see, again, this is when I tell you, This is what happens when you try people in now time for what was going on 30, 40 years ago in a different time period. Because 30, 40 years ago, a 16, 15, 16-year-old girl sleeping with a 25, 26, 27-year-old man, that wasn't as far-fetched as what people believe. It happened way more regularly than people want to admit. Now, in this day and age, yeah, they're going to crucify you. They see something like that happen. But we live in a different world now. Just the same as Elvis could get away with marrying an underage girl and that just being what that was. Men could do that back in that day. In this day and age, you may look at that as creepy, but when that's the world you're born in, that's normal to you. So if something is normal to you, if you're born into something that's already normal, it'll never be unnormal to you. You won't look at it like that. During breaks, the fervent group often streamed the singer's music on a loudspeaker in a park across the street from the courthouse. Some spoke with followers on social media live streams and offered updates on the day's testimony. And when the days ended, many cheered and shook hands with Mr. Kelly's defense lawyers while jeering federal prosecutors as they left the building. After a prosecutor said there had been audible negative reactions to testimony and that the father of one accuser had been verbally accosted, Judge Donnelly, who presided over the trial, warned visitors that they would lose access to the courthouse if they did not behave. So, see, you had R. Kelly fans accosting people's parents. But what else do you expect from savages, man? You also have what some are saying, this trial could become music's hashtag Me Too moment. When the Me Too movement began sweeping through Hollywood politics and the business world in 2017, people in the music industry where unsupervised contact between male stars and young female fans is so common as to be mythologized, wondered when accountability would reach their shores. I don't know if that's what I would look at that as, but you on the casting couch again. If you having sex with a director for a partner role, then it's quid pro quo. One hand is washing the other at that point. You're giving him sex, he's giving you access to this role. He getting what he wants, you getting what you want. You using sex as a weapon, he's using sex as a weapon. Everybody is happy at the end of the day. And if they're not happy, then you shouldn't be participating in that act at that point. The music business has indeed had its share of scandals in recent years. The singers Marilyn Manson and Ryan Adams and the hip hop mogul Russell Simmons have been accused of various kinds of misconduct, which is, again, we'll discuss Russell Simmons and his behavior. But the criminal trial of R. Kelly, which ended with his conviction on Monday, has been by far the most high-profile hashtag #MeToo moment in music. To a great degree, that is a result of the serious nature of the charges that federal prosecutors brought against him, and of the fact that Mr. Kelly was accused of engaging in sex acts with women as young as 13 or 14. But similar accusations against Mr. Kelly have been public for decades, publicized through reporting in the Chicago Sun-Times in the early 2000s and at a child pornography trial in 2008, where he was acquitted. For years, Mr. Kelly remained signed to a major record label where he sold millions of albums and maintained his status as a top-level hitmaker. Stars like Lady Gaga, Jay-Z, Usher, and Chance the Rapper worked with him. In 2013, he performed at the Pitchfork Festival in Chicago, a home for hipster-approved indie rock. And again, Lady Gaga, Jay-Z, and Usher. And I won't say, well, yeah, Jay knew too. You can't even say that. And Chance the Rapper. Jay knew about Aaliyah. Lady Gaga, Usher, and Chance, they knew about Aaliyah and the sex tape. But they still work with him. So you condoned it anyway. Now, have we boycotted Usher, Chance, Lady Gaga, and Jay-Z? No. And you know why? Because if we started boycotting everybody who was involved in enabling this type of behavior, we would have to stop listening to music and watching movies. It wouldn't be anything for us to entertain ourselves with. Mr. Kelly avoided banishment from the music world for so long, and indeed that he was embraced by that world, has been seen as a stain against the industry. It was only in 2017 that public opinion began to turn decisively against Mr. Kelly. That was when BuzzFeed News began to publish a series of investigative reports by Jim DeRogatis, a journalist who had chronicled the accusations against Mr. Kelly at the Sun-Times years before. In 2019, after the broadcast of the documentary Surviving R. Kelly, featuring stomach-turning first-hand accounts by numerous women, Mr. Kelly was finally dropped by his label RCA. By then, Mr. Kelly had not had a hit in a number of years, and that's why they really dropped him. Because it started being, the headache wasn't worth the risk wasn't worth anything at that point. There was no reward to it. The headache was way bigger than the monetary value and gain they was getting. Today, Mr. Kelly has been largely shunned by the music industry at large. Lady Gaga, for example, apologized for working with him and removed the track they recorded together in 2013. But it don't matter at this point because you reaped all the benefits from it while it was happening. You used him and that track to catapult your career and to continue catapulting it. But Mr. Kelly's catalog is still available on streaming services. His popularity there on Spotify, his music draws 5.2 million listeners each month. It suggests a fan base that has never left. Now, let's finish up with R. Kelly's lawyers, and we'll kind of end it there. As he left the courtroom, R. Kelly's lawyers said the defense team would consider appealing the verdict that could send his star client to prison for life. They should have requested and filed for a mistrial when they found out that it was a cop working with the feds who leaked a lot of the stuff out to the public. So, yeah. But like I said, he had Mike Tyson tax attorney lawyers. His lawyers were very, very inept. Of course, we are disappointed in the verdict. The lawyer Devereaux Canick said as he walked through the courthouse, I am even more disappointed in the prosecution for bringing this case, he said, adding that it was replete with inconsistencies. That I can agree with, but unfortunately, he wasn't wise and smart enough to go about attacking those inconsistencies, and therefore, we just had a problem where you wasn't able to make those inconsistencies stick in the jurors' minds for you to be able to win this case. You made all the witnesses basically look credible. And your job as his lawyer was to make those witnesses look uncredible. Asked if Mr. Kelly was prepared for conviction, Mr. Kamek said, I don't think anybody's ever prepared for an outcome like this. Mr. Kamek stepped outside the courthouse where dozens of reporters and camera crews had been stationed all day in anticipation of a verdict. He and other members of the defense team strolled past the microphones, set up for a news conference, and into the adjacent park, where he was quickly ambushed by cameras and microphones. Speaking as he walked, Mr. Kanek told the cameras that witness after witness had given 3, 4, 5 different versions of their stories. So, again, like I said, This case is over. That is what that is. Even though Mr. Canick told the cameras that the witnesses gave 3, 4, 5 different versions of their stories, he couldn't point that out to the jurors. Had he, you would have made those witnesses look uncredible, and you would have made them look like liars. But you weren't capable of doing that. You were very inept at your job. And at this point, like I said, he's going to jail. Should these be the crimes he's going to jail for? No, I don't think so. But that is what that is now. That's water under the bridge. It's been fun doing this case with you guys. But the verdict is what the verdict is. And Kale's ass is out. It's your boy, the Hood Nerd. I'm out.